I grew up in a suburban neighborhood where the lawns were manicured and the houses stood like sentinels of a peaceful life. I was once an optimistic man who believed in the goodness of people. My name is Thomas, and I spent the better part of my adult life married to Sarah, the love of my life. We met in college, and our bond was instant. She was smart, funny, and stunningly beautiful, a whirlwind of ambition and creativity. We got married 5 years ago in a quaint ceremony surrounded by family and friends, and it felt like a dream come true. I had a stable job in a tech firm, and Sarah was a marketing executive, climbing her way up the corporate ladder. I thought we were living the quintessential American dream, a life many envied. However, what I didn't know was that behind the closed doors of our seemingly perfect home, shadows of deceit lurked. One evening, as I returned from work, I sensed a change in the atmosphere. The house was unusually quiet. Sarah usually greeted me with warmth, but that day she simply smiled, her eyes darting away as if she were hiding something. I brushed it off, attributing it to her stress from work. Life had become hectic and I was busy too. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that something was amiss. The signs were subtle at first: late nights at work, whispered conversations on the phone, an unexplained amount of girl time with her friends. I wanted to trust my wife implicitly, to believe that she was still the same person I fell in love with. But the doubts crept in like a thief in the night, stealing my peace of mind. I confided in my best friend, Jake. He had been married for over a decade and always provided a grounded perspective. "You're just being paranoid, man. It's normal for couples to go through tough times," he reassured me. But even as he said this, I could see the flicker of concern in his eyes. Despite the uncertainty, I chose to ignore my instincts for the time being. After all, Sarah had never given me a reason to doubt her. However, the feeling gnawed at me like an insatiable hunger. I decided to take a closer look, to monitor the situation without raising any suspicion. I began to observe her habits more closely. I noticed that her phone was always locked, her messages were kept hidden, and she often received calls in another room. It was as if she were wrapping herself in layers of secrecy. I convinced myself that I was being irrational, but the gnawing doubts only grew stronger with each passing day. As the weeks slipped by, I found myself spiraling into a haze of anxiety. I had never thought that I would be the jealous type, but the seeds of mistrust were firmly planted. It was during one of those restless nights, while Sarah slept soundly beside me, that I made a decision. I needed to confront my fears. I had to know the truth. With a heavy heart, I resolved to investigate further. It was a dangerous path I was treading, one that could lead to heartbreak or, worse, the unraveling of our marriage. Yet the thought of living a lie was far more unbearable than facing the truth. As I prepared myself mentally for what lay ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling that this journey would change everything. I was stepping into a world of intrigue, a web of deceit, that I would soon discover was far more tangled than I could ever imagine. I decided to set my plan in motion one Friday evening. It was a weekend, and Sarah had mentioned a get-together with her colleagues. I was skeptical but feigned indifference. "Have fun," I told her, and she left, a little too eagerly for my liking. I waited until she was out of sight and then grabbed my jacket. I needed to follow her to see where she was really going. I hopped into my car and drove slowly through the neighborhood, keeping a safe distance behind her. My heart raced as I remembered all those times I had trusted her completely. But now, with every turn she took, a wave of dread washed over me. I followed her to a local bar, a place I had never seen her visit before. I parked a block away and walked casually toward the entrance, nerves twisting in my stomach. From my vantage point, I could see her through the large glass windows. She was laughing, her head thrown back, and her eyes sparkling with excitement. But it wasn't the laughter that caught my attention. It was the man sitting across from her. He was tall, with dark hair and sharply dressed. The chemistry between them was undeniable. They leaned in close to one another, whispering conspiratorially, and for the first time I felt my heart shatter. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling as I snapped a few pictures from outside. It was surreal watching my wife be so animated with another man. The warmth of her smile, which had once been reserved for me, now seemed to be shared with a stranger. I felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal as hot anger surged through me. The very foundation of our marriage began to crumble before my eyes. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah and the man stood up and left the bar together, her hand brushing against his arm as they walked out. I followed them, my mind racing with questions. Where were they going? Was this just a friendly outing, or was it something far more sinister? I knew I had to find out. They walked towards a nearby park, and I parked my car again, keeping a safe distance. I watched as they found a secluded bench under the dim glow of a streetlight. Their conversation was muffled, but I could see the way he leaned in closer, how she responded to him with laughter and gentle touches. It was clear that this was more than just a casual meeting. Then the moment I dreaded happened. The man leaned in and kissed her, softly at first, but then with more urgency. I felt the world tilt beneath me as I realized the truth. My wife was cheating on me. The pain clawed at my insides, a physical ache that was almost unbearable. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak colliding within me, and I wanted to scream. But I remained silent, a silent observer to this betrayal. In that moment, clarity washed over me. I could no longer pretend that everything was okay. I had to confront her, but how? I couldn't just walk up to her and confront her with the truth I had just uncovered. No, I needed to be smart about it. I wanted to catch her in the act, to see her face when she realized I had found out. I wanted her to feel the weight of her deception. As they continued their public display of affection, I made my way back to the car, determination replacing the initial shock. I would devise a plan, a way to expose her lies without allowing her to manipulate the narrative. I needed evidence, proof that I could later confront her with. I spent the next few days in a daze, replaying the evening in my mind. I returned to my routine, but my heart was no longer in it. I made excuses for work, staying late, all while devising my strategy. I had to gather more evidence, more than just a few photos that could be dismissed as innocent. I started by following Sarah again, noting her patterns and those late-night meetings with her so-called friends. I found out she was seeing the same man, and I learned his name, Eric. He was a coworker of hers, someone I had never even heard of. My feelings of betrayal intensified with every piece of information I uncovered. Paranoia fused with determination as I became more immersed in my role as a private investigator. I set up a hidden camera in our living room, covering it with an innocuous ornament. I wanted to see how she acted when she thought I wasn't watching, a glimpse into her deceitful world when she thought I was oblivious to her lies. I also enlisted Jake's help, pretending that I needed to vent about work-related stress. I told him that Sarah had been distant and that I suspected something was off. His concern was genuine, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. "You might want to consider talking to her," he suggested. But how could I talk to her when I didn't have the whole truth yet? I needed solid proof. Days turned into weeks, and the burden of my secret weighed heavily on me. I felt like a ghost in my own home, drifting through the motions while living in a nightmare. Each evening, as I reviewed the footage from the hidden camera, my heart sank further. I saw the glances she sent to her phone, and the way she became animated when she received a message. I knew then that I was close to exposing her. I was on the brink of a confrontation that would change everything. The evidence was mounting, and I was ready to reveal her betrayal, but I still needed to fortify my resolve. The days blurred into one another, and the sting of betrayal simmered in my chest. I had collected enough evidence to confront Sarah about her infidelity, but revenge was a different beast altogether. I didn't want to just expose her. I wanted her to truly understand the pain she had caused me. I knew I had to be calculated in my approach, turning the tables in a way that would leave her feeling the weight of her actions. I began to plan meticulously. My first step was to gather all the evidence I had collected, photos, videos, and text messages. I created a digital folder on my laptop, naming it Truth. Each image and video were labeled with the date and time. I envisioned the moment I would confront her, imagined the look on her face when she realized I had been watching her all along. It fueled my determination, igniting a fire within me. But I needed to take it a step further. I wanted her to feel as if she had lost control over the situation, just as I had lost control over my life. I decided that I would not confront her in anger but with calmness and poise. I wanted her to think that I was oblivious and that I was going about my life as usual. I would act as if everything was perfectly fine at home, while secretly plotting my revenge. I started by being extra attentive and caring, something that felt foreign given the circumstances. I made her breakfast every morning, sent her sweet messages during the day, and even picked her up from work. I wanted her to feel comfortable, to let her guard down. It was a strange game we were playing, her in her world of deceit and me in mine of calculated revenge. Meanwhile, I began to dig deeper into Eric's life. I discovered his social media accounts, where photos of him with friends and family were plentiful. He seemed to have a good life, one that I was determined to disrupt. I learned that he frequented the same bar where I first saw Sarah with him, and that knowledge turned my stomach. I could envision a confrontation, not just with Sarah, but with him as well. The idea formed in my mind. I would reveal not only Sarah's betrayal but also Eric's role in it. I would make him understand the consequences of his actions, the pain he had inflicted on someone who had trusted him, someone who thought she was in a committed relationship. The rage I felt began to take shape into something more focused. I devised a plan to confront both of them in a way that would leave a lasting impact. I would arrange a meeting at that same bar under the guise of a casual get-together with friends. I would invite a few of my own friends, ensuring that the setting was lively and public. I wanted to catch them off guard, to see their reactions when they realized I was aware of everything. The chaos that would ensue would be the cherry on top of my revenge. As I set the date for this confrontation, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. It was a dangerous game I was playing, yet I felt empowered. I had transformed from the betrayed husband into a man with a plan. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and I was ready to serve it up. In the days leading up to the confrontation, I kept my composure. I acted like the devoted husband that I had been all along. I wanted Sarah to feel the weight of her deception when I revealed my hand. Each tender gesture felt hollow, but I was committed to the end game. The night of the meeting finally arrived. My heart raced as I put on my best outfit, a dark shirt and tailored pants that made me feel confident. I wanted to appear unbothered, composed, and in control. I arrived at the bar early, setting the stage for what would be a night of reckoning. As I waited at the bar, I sipped a whiskey, my nerves tingling with anticipation. I had arranged for Jake and a few other friends to show up, and they arrived shortly thereafter, unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. I briefed them on my plan, and they exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how this would all play out. When Sarah and Eric entered the bar, I could feel the tension in the air shift. I spotted them immediately, laughing together as if they were the only two people in the room. My heart pounded heavily in my chest as I watched them stroll in, side by side, with that unmistakable chemistry that I had once thought was mine alone. I nodded to my friends and we made our way to a large table in the center of the bar. My chest tightened as I took a deep breath, mentally preparing myself for the confrontation. The moment had arrived. As they approached our table, I noticed their smiles falter when they recognized me. "Tom," Sarah exclaimed, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. Eric looked taken aback, his expression shifting from confusion to uncertainty. They had both been caught off guard. "Hey, Sarah," Eric, I replied, forcing a casual tone, even as adrenaline surged through my veins. "What a coincidence to see you here." They exchanged nervous glances, and I could practically feel the tension crackling in the air. This was it. The moment of truth was upon us, and I was ready to expose the betrayal I had been living with for too long. "Why don't you guys join us?" I suggested, motioning toward the empty seats. "We could all use a drink." My friends smiled widely, oblivious to the underlying tension. But as Sarah and Eric hesitated, I could see the panic in their eyes. They knew something was wrong, and I was about to make it clear. The tension at our table was palpable as Sarah and Eric exchanged wary glances. They both knew that something was off, and I was reveling in the moment, feeling like a puppeteer pulling all the strings. Come on, join us. It'll be fun, I urged, my voice dripping with false cheerfulness. Reluctantly, they sat down, their bodies tense and their expressions guarded. I could see that Sarah was trying to maintain her composure, but I knew she was unraveling underneath the surface. I had watched her play the part of the perfect wife for too long, and now she was caught in a web of her own making. Jake nudged me, sensing my growing intensity. "So what's the plan, man?" he whispered, his curiosity piqued. I just smiled, taking a sip of my drink, letting the whiskey wash away some of the tension building inside me. "Let's just enjoy the night," I replied cryptically, my eyes fixed on Sarah. "How, workbin Sarah? Still making those big moves at the office?" I asked, feigning interest while my heart raced with anticipation. "Oh, you know the usual," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just busy with projects and meetings." I could see Eric's discomfort as he shifted in his seat, glancing at Sarah, who was now nervously tapping her fingers on the table. I leaned back, enjoying the control I felt in this situation. The tension was thick, and I could sense the undercurrents of their anxiety. As the night wore on, I orchestrated the conversation to keep things light while playing my own mind games. I brought up the bar's happy hour specials and discussed mundane topics, but inside I was building up to my reveal. I glanced at Jake and our friends, and they were catching on to the strangeness of the situation, their eyes darting between me and Sarah. Finally, I decided it was time to strike. "You know," I said casually, leaning forward, "I've been meaning to ask you, Sarah. How's Eric treating you at work? You've been spending a lot of time together lately, haven't you?" I let the words hang in the air, watching as her face paled. Her eyes flicked to Eric, who looked as if he had just swallowed a lemon. "What do you mean?" she asked, feigning ignorance, but her voice was shaky. "Oh, come on," I pressed. "You know what I mean. Late nights at work, secret phone calls, and rendezvous at bars. It's hard to keep up the act, don't you think?" I leaned back again, my heart pounding as I watched realization dawn on her. Sarah's face flushed with a mixture of fear and anger. "Tom, what are you talking about?" she snapped, but there was a tremor in her voice. "That's ridiculous." I could feel the weight of the moment shifting, and I took a deep breath. "You know, I've always trusted you, Sarah, but lately your behavior has given me cause for concern." I pulled out my phone, the anticipation rising as I scrolled through the photos I had taken. "I think it's time we looked at the truth together." I placed my phone on the table, the screen facing Sarah, and clicked through the images, one by one. I watched her face as it transformed from confusion to horror as she processed what she was seeing. Photos of her and Eric laughing, intimately close, their body language revealing the deep connection I had. Feared, her eyes widened as she saw the unmistakable evidence of her betrayal. "Tom, please," she pleaded, her voice strained. "It's not what it looks like." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at her response. "Not what it looks like. Sarah, it looks exactly like what it is, a betrayal. You've been lying to me, to our marriage." My voice dripped with the pain I felt, and the room fell silent. Jake and the others exchanged stunned glances, shocked at the revelation unfolding before them. Eric, on the other hand, had turned a ghostly shade of white. I can explain," he stammered, but I wasn't interested in his excuses. I met Sarah's gaze, my heart heavy yet resolute. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, my voice low and steady. "How long have you been seeing him behind my back?" Sarah opened her mouth to speak, and I could see the tears welling in her eyes. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen," she cried, desperation creeping into her voice. "A mistake? You mean falling in love with someone else is a mistake?" I shot back, the hurt transforming into anger. "You've destroyed everything we built together, and for what? A fling? Was it worth it?" "Tom, please, let's talk about this, just the two of us," she pleaded, her voice trembling. But the chance to talk was long gone. I could see the facade crumbling, the carefully constructed life we had built together unraveling before my eyes. In that moment, I realized that I no longer wanted to salvage our marriage. I had been thinking of revenge, but now it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't want to hold on to the pain. I wanted to break free. "You've made your choice, Sarah," I said firmly. "And now I'm going to make mine. You can't just betray someone and expect them to forgive and forget." Sarah's expression shifted as realization sank in. "So that's it? "You're just going to walk away?" she asked, her voice cracking. "After tonight, I won't walk away." "I'll run," I declared, feeling a rush of freedom course through me. "You can keep your lies, your deceit, and your new life with Eric. I hope it was worth the cost of our marriage." The tension in the bar was palpable, the weight of the confrontation hanging in the air like a thick fog. I turned to my friends who were still processing the chaos. "Let's go," I said coolly, standing up from the table. "I think we've had enough fun for one night." As I walked away, I could hear Sarah's voice fatting behind me, desperation lacing her words, but I didn't look back. I had made my decision, and I was ready to embrace the future that awaited me, one that would no longer be shrouded in betrayal. The days following the confrontation felt surreal. I had stepped away from a life that had become a facade, a life built on trust that had been shattered by deceit. I went through the motions of my daily routine, but inside, I was a storm of emotions. Anger, sadness, and relief all mingled together, creating a confusing swirl of feelings that I struggled to navigate. I didn't return home that night after the confrontation. Instead, I checked into a hotel nearby, seeking solitude to process the chaos. My mind replayed the evening over and over, the look on Sarah's face when she realized I knew, the shocked expressions of my friends, and the way Eric had squirmed under the weight of the truth. I relished in it all, feeling a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in months. I spent the next few days in a haze. I didn't reach out to Sarah, not even to ask for my belongings. I didn't feel ready to have that conversation, the one where we would sort through the wreckage of our marriage. I needed time to think, to fully grasp the situation and what I wanted moving forward. During that period, I threw myself into work, pouring my energy into projects that had long been neglected. I found solace in the familiar routine of my job, letting the stress of deadlines distract me from the emotional turmoil I was facing. I also began to reconnect with friends, those who had been supportive through all the ups and downs of my marriage. They welcomed me back into their lives, and I found comfort in their company. It wasn't long before Sarah reached out. She started with texts, casual at first, asking how I was doing and if we could talk. Each message felt like a stab in the gut, a reminder of the betrayal I was still processing. I ignored her for the most part, but eventually I knew I would have to face her again. When I finally agreed to meet, I chose a small cafe downtown, a neutral territory where I could maintain some distance. I arrived early, my heart racing with anticipation. I didn't know what to expect from her, whether she would apologize or try to justify her actions. I had rehearsed my lines countless times in my head, preparing for all possible scenarios. When she walked in, it was as if time froze. She looked different, hollowed out, her eyes darkened by sleepless nights and guilt. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, anger, sadness, and a flicker of compassion for the woman who had once been my everything. But I quickly buried that compassion beneath the weight of betrayal. "Thank you for meeting me," Sarah said softly as she approached the table. Her voice was tentative and her eyes searched mine for a hint of understanding. I remained stoic, keeping my expression neutral. "We need to talk about everything," she continued, her voice shaking slightly. "I owe you that much, do you?" I replied, my words laced with bitterness. "You had your chance to be honest with me, Sarah. You chose Eric over our marriage." "I know," she said, tears brimming in her eyes, "and I regret it more than you can imagine. I wish I could take it all back. I was lost. I didn't realize what I had until it was too late." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" I shot back, my anger rising. "You broke my trust, shattered everything we built together. You can't just gloss over it with apologies and regrets." I watched as her face fell, the weight of her guilt pressing down on her. "I know I can't fix everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I want to try. I want to show you that I can be better, that I can earn your trust back." A part of me wanted to believe her, to hope that we could salvage something from the wreckage. But another part, a more rational part, reminded me of the pain I had endured. "What makes you think I would want that?" I replied coldly. "You've made your choice and now you have to live with the consequences." "I love you, Tom," she said, her voice cracking. "I've always loved you. I messed up terribly, but I want to make it right." Hearing those words struck a nerve. Could love really survive such betrayal? I had always believed in the strength of our bond, but now I was questioning every moment we had shared. What you call love feels more like a betrayal to me, I said, my voice firm. Love doesn't hurt the person you're supposed to cherish. You're right, she admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I hope you'll at least consider what we had. I don't want to lose you for good. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms as I took a deep breath. The tension in the air was thick, and I felt the weight of her words pressing down on me. You've already lost me, Sarah. I need time to figure out what I want, and right now, that doesn't include you. Her shoulders dropped and she nodded slowly as if accepting a painful truth. I understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll give you space, but please know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. As she left the cafe, I felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over me. I had stood my ground, asserting my worth amidst the chaos she had created. But the emptiness of our shattered marriage lingered in my heart, a constant reminder of what could have been. In the following weeks, I focused on rebuilding my life. I dedicated time to my career, threw myself into hobbies I had neglected, and began to explore new friendships. I sought therapy to help process the emotions I had suppressed for so long, allowing myself the space to heal. I was learning to prioritize my own happiness, to embrace the freedom that came with letting go. As I navigated this new chapter, I found strength in independence. The wounds of betrayal were still fresh, but I was learning how to rise from the ashes. I wasn't ready to forgive Sarah, and part of me wondered if I ever would be. I had to find closure on my own terms, and that took time. Yet deep down, I also knew that my journey wasn't over. I eventually had to decide whether to completely sever ties with Sarah or to allow her back into my life, albeit cautiously. The future was uncertain, but I was determined to find a path that honored my feelings and my worth. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself at a crossroads. I had made significant strides in healing from the betrayal, but the emotional scars remained. I had filled my days with work and new interests, yet there were moments when thoughts of Sarah would creep back in, reminding me of the life I once had, a life now fractured by her infidelity. I had distanced myself from her, focusing on personal growth and rediscovering who I was outside of our marriage. I took up hiking, spending weekends exploring nature, finding solace in the mountains and the tranquility of the outdoors. I even started cooking again, something I had always enjoyed but had set aside during our marriage. Each new experience was a step toward reclaiming my identity. Eventually, I received a package in the mail. Unexpected delivery from Sarah. Inside was a letter, handwritten, filled with emotions that poured out onto the pages. She expressed her regret and her longing for the connection we once shared. She wrote about her journey of self-reflection and growth, acknowledging the mistakes she had made and the impact they had on both our lives. Reading her words stirred something in me. I could feel the weight of her pain, and as much as I wanted to dismiss her, part of me still cared for the woman I had loved. I could see that she was genuinely trying to make sense of her actions, and while it didn't excuse her betrayal, it did show that she was willing to change. I took my time processing the letter, reflecting on everything that had happened. I found myself grappling with my feelings of anger, hurt, and a flicker of hope for the future. Was it possible to rebuild a connection after everything that had transpired? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew I needed to see her again to truly understand. I agreed to meet Sarah, this time at a park, a neutral, open space where we could speak freely without the heaviness of a cafe or the intimacy of our home. As I approached, I noticed her sitting on a bench, a vulnerable look on her face as she spotted me. "Hey," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," I replied, my heart racing. I took a seat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. We began to talk, slowly easing into the conversation. Sarah spoke about her therapy sessions and the steps she was taking to understand why she had strayed. She expressed deep remorse, not just for the affair but for the way she had treated me throughout our relationship. I listened carefully, sensing the sincerity in her words, but I remained guarded. "I know I can't take back the past," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. but I'm committed to becoming a better person for myself and for the people I care about. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope we can find a way to move forward, whatever that looks like." Her honesty struck a chord within me. I realized that I had spent so much time focusing on my own pain that I had neglected to consider her journey as well. While I didn't want to dive back into a relationship, there was a part of me that wondered if we could find common ground again, if not as a couple, then perhaps as friends who had shared a significant chapter in each other's lives. "I appreciate your honesty, Sarah," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But I need to be clear. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. It's going to take time, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet." She nodded, accepting my words with grace. "I understand," she said. "I'm not asking for anything from you. I just wanted you to know where I stand. I will always cherish the time we had, but I also respect your need for space." As we continued to talk, I felt a shift within myself. The anger that had consumed me was slowly dissipating, replaced by a sense of understanding. I realized that while I couldn't erase the past, I had the power to shape my own future. I didn't have to hold on to the bitterness. I could let go and move forward unencumbered. After that meeting, we kept in touch, slowly rebuilding a tenuous connection. It wasn't easy, nor was it without its challenges. There were moments when old wounds would resurface, but I found comfort in knowing that we were both working on ourselves. Sarah continued her journey of reflection while I focused on my own healing. Eventually, I began to date again. It was a nerve-wracking experience, stepping back into the world of relationships after the devastation I had experienced. I approached each new person with caution, allowing myself to feel without rushing into anything. My heart was still raw, but I was learning to embrace vulnerability once more. As months turned into a year, I found myself in a new relationship with someone who appreciated me in ways I had never imagined. She was kind, understanding, and supportive, helping me heal and rediscover the joy of companionship. My past with Sarah no longer haunted me. Instead, it became a part of my story, a chapter that shaped who I was but didn't define me. In time, I learned that forgiveness isn't about condoning what happened. It's about freeing myself from the weight of resentment. I forgave Sarah, not for her sake but for mine. It was a conscious decision, one that allowed me to release the pain and embrace the possibilities of the future. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I reflected on how far I had come. Life had thrown me into a whirlwind of emotions, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever lay ahead. The scars remained, but they no longer felt like chains. Instead, they became badges of resilience, proof of the battles I had fought and the man I had become. As I thought of Sarah, I hoped she was finding her own way too. I didn't need to know the details of her journey. I simply wished her well. Our paths may have diverged, but I knew that the lessons learned during that tumultuous time would continue to guide me as I embraced the beauty of new beginnings. With a heart full of hope, I raised a glass to the future, one that was finally within my reach. And so, I stepped into the next chapter of my life, ready to embrace all the possibilities that awaited me.